Imagine waking up one morning and discovering footprints in the snow. Footprints emerging from a dark forest. Footprints leading directly toward your home. And then realizing there are no footprints leading away. Someone came, but apparently they never left. In March of 1922, a farmer named Andreas Gruber noticed exactly that. A trail of footprints crossing a field and heading toward his isolated farm. At first it seemed strange, but not alarming. Perhaps a traveler, a hunter, a curious stranger. Yet something about the tracks bothered him, because whoever made them appeared to have vanished. Then more strange things began to happen. Andreas reported hearing footsteps in the attic. Sometimes during the day, sometimes late at night. The sounds were faint, but impossible to ignore. Soon afterward, he found a newspaper lying on the property. Nobody in the household recognized it. Nobody knew where it came from. Then a key disappeared, simply vanished, as if someone else now had access to the farm. Looking back, these warnings seem impossible to ignore. But at the time, life continued, and nobody called the police. The farm was called Hinterkaifeck, a small and isolated property in Bavaria, Germany. Living there were 6 people: Andreas Gruber, his wife, Cecilia, their widowed daughter, Victoria, her young daughter, also named Cecilia, her 2-year-old son, Joseph, and the family's newly hired maid, Maria Baumgartner. To outsiders, they seemed like an ordinary farming family, but villagers often described them as private, secretive, and sometimes troubled. Rumors surrounded the household. Arguments, family tensions, and stories nobody wanted to discuss openly. Yet nobody could have predicted what was coming. Only a few days after the strange footprints appeared, everything changed. The family would disappear. No one would see them again. No one would hear from them again. And when neighbors finally entered the property, they would uncover a crime so brutal, so disturbing, that it would become one of the most famous unsolved murder cases in history. But the murders themselves are only part of the mystery, because evidence later suggested something almost impossible. The killer may not have left. In fact, the killer may have stayed inside the farmhouse among the victims for days. More than 100 years later, investigators, historians, and true crime enthusiasts continue searching for answers. Who murdered 6 people on an isolated farm? Why were they killed? And perhaps most chilling of all, who was hiding at Hinterkaifeck before the murders? Tonight, we examine every clue, every suspect, and every disturbing theory to uncover the truth behind the mystery of Hinterkaifeck. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe Dr. Ganua and hit the like button so you can easily catch our future videos. And thank you for being here. This is my very first video, and your support means a lot. Now, let's continue with the story. To understand what happened at Hinterkaifeck, we first need to understand the people who lived there. In 1922, Bavaria was still recovering from the devastation of the First World War. Many families depended entirely on farming for survival. Life was hard, money was scarce, and every day was filled with labor. Hinterkaifeck was no exception. The farm sat alone among fields and forests, far enough from nearby villages that its residents often lived in near complete isolation. And for the Gruber family, that isolation would eventually become deadly. The head of the household was Andreas Gruber, 63 years old, a lifelong farmer, and according to many who knew him, a difficult man. Neighbors described Andreas as harsh, controlling, quick-tempered, the type of person who demanded obedience from everyone around him. Whether these descriptions were entirely fair is impossible to know today, but one thing is certain: Andreas was not particularly liked within the community, and over the years, rumors about his family began spreading throughout the village. Rumors that would later become central to the investigation. Living with Andreas was his daughter, Victoria Gabriel, a widow in her mid-30s. By all accounts, Victoria worked tirelessly on the farm while raising her children, yet she too found herself at the center of village gossip. Her husband, Carl Gabriel, had reportedly died during World War I, but strange stories persisted. Some claimed Carl had survived the war. Others believed he had secretly returned. Years later, these rumors would fuel one of the most controversial theories in the entire case, but for now, they remained only whispers. Stories exchanged quietly between neighbors, stories that would gain new significance after the murders. The youngest residents of Hinterkaifeck were 7-year-old Cecilia and 2-year-old Josef. Unlike the adults, they had no involvement in family disputes, no enemies, no scandals, no secrets. They were simply children, and perhaps that is one reason the crime remains so disturbing. Whoever committed the murders showed no mercy, not even for the youngest members of the household. For investigators, that fact suggested something chilling. This was not a robbery gone wrong. This appeared to be personal, very personal. By 1922, Hinterkaifeck had become a place many villagers discussed, but few truly understood. Stories circulated constantly. Some were probably exaggerated. Others may have contained elements of truth. The family seemed isolated even from their own community, and that isolation made them easy targets for speculation. But one rumor stood out from all the others, a rumor so serious that authorities had investigated it years earlier, a rumor involving Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria. The allegations shocked the entire region, and while they occurred years before the murders, some investigators would later wonder whether those events had set the stage for everything that followed. Because behind the walls of Hinterkaifeck, there may have been secrets far darker than anyone imagined, and just as those secrets lingered over the farm, something else was happening. Someone, or something, appeared to be watching the house. Years before the murders, the Gruber family had already attracted unwanted attention. Authorities had investigated allegations of an inappropriate relationship between Andreas Gruber and his daughter Victoria. The accusations became a local scandal. Although details remain disputed more than a century later, the rumors spread throughout the region. Many villagers never forgot them, and when the murders occurred, investigators would return to those allegations again and again, searching for motives, searching for enemies, searching for anyone who might have wanted revenge. But while the villagers focused on old scandals, something strange was happening at the farm itself, something that could not be explained. Several months before the killings, the family's previous maid abruptly quit. At the time, she gave an unusual explanation. She believed the farm was haunted. According to reports, she frequently heard strange noises, unexplained sounds coming from different parts of the property. Especially at night, the noises frightened her so much that she refused to stay. Eventually, she left her position entirely. For most people, this might sound like superstition, a nervous servant imagining things in an old farmhouse. But after the murders, many began to wonder, had she heard something supernatural, or had she heard someone hiding inside the property? Then came the footprints, one of the most famous details in the entire case. A few days before the murders, Andreas Gruber noticed tracks in the snow. They began at the edge of the forest, crossed the field, and headed directly toward Hinterkaifeck. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about them, but Andreas quickly noticed something unsettling. There were no return tracks, no evidence that the person had walked back into the woods, no indication they had left at all. Whoever came to the farm appeared to have disappeared. Andreas mentioned the footprints to neighbors, yet despite his concern, he still did not contact police. It would be a decision he never had the chance to reconsider. Shortly after discovering the footprints, Andreas reported hearing unusual noises in the attic. Footsteps, movement, sounds that seemed to come from directly above the family's living quarters. He searched the property, but found nothing, at least nothing obvious. The noises continued, sometimes during the day, sometimes after sunset, always leaving behind the same uncomfortable question: was someone hiding inside the farmhouse? And if so, for how long? Then two more strange discoveries followed. First, Andreas found a newspaper on the property. Nobody in the household had purchased it. Nobody recognized it. No one knew how it arrived. Then a house key went missing, simply gone. At the time, neither incident seemed significant, but viewed together, they painted a disturbing picture. Someone might have been entering the property without permission. Someone who knew the farm. Someone who wanted access. Today, many researchers believe these events were connected. The footprints, the attic noises, the missing key, the mysterious newspaper. Each clue by itself could be dismissed. Together, they suggest something far more sinister. The possibility that someone was secretly observing the family, learning their routines, studying the property, waiting. Then, on March 31st, 1922, a new maid named Maria Baumgartner arrived at Hinterkaifeck. It was her first day on the farm. She had only recently accepted the position. Friends and relatives later recalled seeing her before she left for the farm. None of them could have imagined what would happen next. Maria had no connection to the strange rumors surrounding the family, no known enemies, no involvement in village disputes. She was simply beginning a new job. Within hours, she would become the sixth victim. March 31st, 1922. At first, it seemed like an ordinary day. The Gruber family followed their usual routine. Farm work needed to be completed. Animals needed feeding. Meals needed preparing. Nothing about the morning suggested that these would be the final hours of their lives. Yet somewhere beyond the farmyard, the mystery was already unfolding. If the strange warnings from previous days meant anything, then someone may already have been watching. Someone who knew exactly where every member of the family would be, and someone who was waiting for the right moment to act. As evening approached, the farm slowly settled into its normal rhythm. The daylight faded, temperatures dropped, the surrounding countryside became quiet. It was the kind of evening that farmers had experienced thousands of times before, but something about this night was different. Investigators would later conclude that the killer likely struck after dark. Exactly how events unfolded remains uncertain. No witnesses survived. No one was there to tell the story. Yet the evidence left behind allows us to reconstruct a chilling possibility. Investigators believe the first victims were drawn toward the barn, one at a time, not all together. This detail would later become one of the strangest aspects of the crime. Think about it. If a violent attack had begun immediately, the others inside the house would likely have heard screams or signs of struggle. Instead, evidence suggested that family members entered the barn separately. Perhaps they heard a noise, perhaps someone called for help, or perhaps they trusted the person waiting there. Whatever happened, 4 members of the household eventually found themselves inside the barn, and none of them came back out. What happened next shocked even experienced investigators. The attack was swift, deliberate, and terrifyingly efficient. There was no evidence of a robbery, no signs that valuables had been the primary target. Instead, the murders appeared focused on the people. Someone wanted this family dead. The question was why. By the end of the night, Andreas Gruber was dead. His wife Cecilia was dead. His daughter Victoria was dead, and young Cecilia was dead. 4 victims, all discovered in the barn. But investigators soon realized the tragedy did not end there, because 2 more people were still missing. The newly arrived maid, Maria Baumgartner, and 2-year-old Josef. The search continued into the house, and what investigators found inside would make the mystery even more disturbing, because the killer wasn't finished. The morning after the murders came and went, then another day passed, and another. Yet nobody realized what had happened at Hinterkaifeck. The farm remained silent. No smoke signaled distress. No visitor reported anything unusual. Life in the surrounding villages continued as normal, but slowly, people began noticing something strange. The Gruber family was nowhere to be seen. The family failed to attend church. That alone was unusual. Then mail began piling up. Deliveries were left untouched. Neighbors noticed that no one appeared outside. No children were seen playing. No adults were working the fields. The silence felt wrong, especially in a place where daily routines rarely changed. By April 4th, concern had turned into suspicion. Something was not right at Hinterkaifeck, and several neighbors decided to investigate. What they were about to discover would haunt Germany for generations. As the neighbors approached the property, nothing seemed obviously wrong. The farm stood quietly in the countryside. The buildings appeared intact. The animals could be heard in the distance. At first glance, Hinterkaifeck looked exactly as it always had, but appearances can be deceptive. Within minutes, the visitors would stumble upon one of the most horrifying crime scenes in German history. And the first discovery would be made inside the barn. Inside the barn, 4 bodies were discovered. Andreas Gruber, his wife Kazelia, their daughter Victoria, and 7-year-old Kazelia. The scene immediately raised questions. Why were all 4 victims found there? Why had they apparently entered the barn? And perhaps most importantly, who had been waiting for them? Investigators would spend decades trying to answer those questions, yet the deeper they looked, the stranger the case became. Because the barn was only the beginning, searchers continued through the farmhouse, room by room. The silence was overwhelming. Then they discovered the final 2 victims, Maria Baumgartner and young Joseph. Neither had escaped the attack. All 6 residents of Hinterkaifeck were dead. An entire family erased in a single night, but investigators quickly noticed something that made no sense. The animals were alive, and they appeared to have been cared for. Food had been provided. The livestock had not been abandoned. Inside the house, there were signs that meals had been prepared. The stove had been used. Someone had maintained the property. But how? Every member of the household was dead, which meant only one possibility remained. Someone else had been there. This revelation transformed the case. The murders were horrifying, but what came afterward was almost impossible to comprehend. Evidence suggested that the killer did not immediately flee. Instead, someone may have remained on the farm for days. Think about that for a moment. An unknown person, walking through the house, preparing food, tending animals, sleeping somewhere on the property, all while 6 victims lay dead nearby. Even experienced investigators struggled to explain it. Why would a murderer stay? What were they waiting for? And perhaps most disturbing of all, where exactly were they hiding? Suddenly, the strange warnings from before the murders took on a terrifying new meaning. The footprints, the missing key, the attic noises, the newspaper. What if they weren't warnings at all? What if they were evidence? Evidence that the killer had already been there, watching, waiting, living among the family long before the murders began. Now investigators faced a mystery unlike anything they had seen before, and the list of suspects would only make the story stranger. News of the murders spread rapidly across Bavaria. The crime shocked the public. Entire families being murdered was rare. An entire household wiped out in a single night was almost unheard of. Police quickly arrived at Hinterkaifeck, but from the very beginning, investigators faced a serious problem. There were no surviving witnesses, no confession, no obvious suspect, and no clear motive. The only thing everyone agreed on was that whoever committed the murders likely knew the farm very well. Consider what the killer had accomplished. 4 victims were somehow drawn into the barn separately. No one managed to escape. No one alerted nearby neighbors, and afterward, the murderer apparently moved around the property comfortably. That suggests familiarity, not just with the buildings, but with the family itself. Many investigators became convinced that the killer either knew the victims personally, or had spent considerable time observing them beforehand. One of the earliest and most famous theories involved Victoria's husband, Carl Gabriel. Officially, Carl had died during World War I, but over the years, rumors spread that he had survived. Some villagers claimed they had seen him, others insisted he was still alive somewhere in Germany. As the rumors grew, a dramatic theory emerged. What if Carl had returned? What if he discovered something at Hinterkaifeck that enraged him? And what if revenge had followed? The theory captured public imagination. The story remained speculation, yet it refused to disappear. Even today, it remains one of the most discussed possibilities. Police also examined former employees and local residents. Anyone with a connection to the family became a potential suspect. Former workers, neighbors, business associates, travelers who had passed through the region. Over the years, dozens of names would be linked to the crime. Some were investigated thoroughly, others were little more than rumors, but none could be definitively connected to the murders. One by one, theories collapsed under scrutiny, and the mystery endured. Yet among all the competing theories, one stood apart, not because of who it accused, but because of what it suggested. What if the murderer wasn't an outsider who arrived on the night of the crime? What if the killer had already been there, living secretly on the property, hiding in unused spaces, watching the family's routines, listening to their conversations, learning exactly when to strike? Suddenly, the attic noises made sense. The missing key made sense. Even the footprints made sense. For many researchers, this remains the most unsettling explanation, because it means the family may have been sharing their home with a stranger without ever realizing it. But there was one problem. No evidence ever identified who that person might have been. No hidden belongings were discovered. No witness came forward. No name could be attached to the theory. Investigators had a possible scenario, but not a suspect. And as the years passed, the trail only grew colder. As weeks turned into months, and months turned into years, the Hinterkaifeck investigation continued. Police interviewed witnesses, followed leads, examined suspects, and revisited old rumors. But every path seemed to end the same way, with more questions. No arrest was ever made, no confession was ever obtained, and no piece of evidence ever provided a definitive answer. Slowly, the case transformed from a criminal investigation into a national mystery. Most unsolved crimes eventually fade from public memory. Witnesses die, evidence disappears, interest fades. But Hinterkaifeck was different. Something about the story refused to let go. Perhaps it was the isolated farmhouse, perhaps it was the mysterious footprints, or perhaps it was the chilling possibility that the killer had remained on the property after the murders. Generation after generation continued searching for answers, and long after the original investigators were gone, new researchers reopened the case. In the 21st century, researchers began reviewing the case using modern investigative methods. Old witness statements were analyzed again. Timelines were reconstructed. Theories were tested against surviving evidence. One particularly notable review occurred in 2007, when a group of police academy students conducted an extensive examination of the case. After studying the available material, they reportedly identified a likely suspect, but there was a catch. The suspect was already dead, and the evidence was not strong enough to establish certainty. As a result, the name was never officially released. The mystery remained unsolved. More than a century later, the same clues continue to dominate discussions. The footprints leading toward the farm, the strange noises in the attic, the missing key, the unexplained newspaper, the maid who believed the property was haunted, and perhaps the most disturbing clue of all, the evidence suggesting someone stayed behind after the murders. Individually, each clue raises questions. Together, they create a picture that is both fascinating and deeply unsettling, a picture of a crime that may have begun long before the murders themselves. Imagine living at Hinterkaifeck during those final days. You hear footsteps above your head. You discover footprints leading from the forest. A key disappears, objects appear where they shouldn't be, and yet life continues. You go to sleep believing tomorrow will be normal, never realizing that someone may already be watching. Someone may already be inside the property. Someone may already be planning what comes next. That possibility is what makes Hinterkaifeck so terrifying. Not simply the violence, but the idea that danger may have been present all along, hidden in plain sight. Today, the original farmhouse no longer stands. The people who knew the victims are gone. The investigators are gone, and the killer, whoever they were, is almost certainly gone as well. Yet the mystery remains, waiting, unanswered, frozen in time. A century later, we still do not know exactly what happened at Hinterkaifeck, and perhaps we never will. Maybe the truth died with the victims, maybe investigators came close and never realized it, or maybe the answer has been hiding in the evidence all along, waiting for someone to see what everyone else missed. More than 100 years later, Hinterkaifeck remains one of the most chilling unsolved murder cases in history, not because of what we know, but because of what we don't. Thank you for watching. The Hinterkaifeck Murders remain one of history's most haunting unsolved cases. Before we go, let's remember the victims who lost their lives that night. May they rest in peace. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. This was my very first video, so thank you for your support. I'll see you in the next one.